US President Joe Biden has unveiled a $2 trillion infrastructure plan he says will allow America to beat China economically and position the country as a global leader in clean energy technology. Joining me now live from Washington, D.C. is Elliot Nelson, political commentator and author of The Beltway Bible. Elliot, thank you for joining me. This plan really is all-encompassing. How has it been received in the US?
Well, by the voters, quite well. Polls this week find that a majority of Americans support robust infrastructure spending, which this proposal certainly entails. However, the real concern for the Biden administration is the Democratic Party's razor-thin margins in the U.S. Senate. They only control that chamber by one vote. And Republican Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said this week that he will strongly oppose the bill. So Democrats have no political room to maneuver right now in getting this ambitious bill passed.
Let's move on to what's been a captivating trial that's begun in the US this week. Derek Chauvin, of course, now on trial for allegedly killing George Floyd. It's something the world is watching very closely. How pivotal is this, especially as more details emerge about his final moments?
Well, the police killings of George Floyd and others such as Breonna Taylor has galvanized the civil rights movement in this country in ways that we really haven't seen since the 1960s. And however this trial turns out will no doubt have a huge impact on how that movement goes forward. Interestingly enough, per our last discussion point, this trial could actually very much impact the Biden administration's agenda. A good number of Democrats right now are far more focused on these matters of civil rights, including voting restriction laws that were passed in Georgia just recently. And an innocent conviction or an innocent ruling of Derek Chauvin could really have the effect of turning a lot of Democrats' attention to items that aren't the Biden administration's infrastructure plan.
And it's been touted as one of the most important in US history. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, it certainly is one of the most important in recent history, and one could argue one of the most important as it relates to American civil rights over the last 50 or so years. This has been watched quite closely here in the States, and as growing sentiment has grown more and more critical of police behavior towards African Americans, the outcome of this trial could very much galvanize support in a way that no single trial has, arguably since the innocent ruling of O.J. Simpson in the 1990s, of the former American football player.
And it's really put all global eyes on Minneapolis. 12 months on, almost 12 months on from George Floyd's alleged killing, how is the town going?
Well, right now, I think it's easy to kind of forget, with all the things going on in the world right now, from coronavirus to the presidential election, just how this narrative of the civil rights movement, the mistreatment of African Americans by police, has very much defined American politics over the last 5 or so years, or rather been an undercurrent of it. As we've seen, sadly, these killings happen with some regularity. So even if, say, the ruling of Derek Chauvin doesn't necessarily have as much of an impact as we might predict, I suspect that we'll be having similar kind of fulcrum points in American civil rights in the not too distant future.
All right, let's move on now. This week, Australia and the US joined about a dozen other countries expressing shared concerns about the World Health Organization's report into the origins of the pandemic. What has the US had to say?
Well, the U.S. and its other allied nations, including Australia, have voiced very strong concerns about the transparency and data that the WHO had access to for the report. This week, the White House strongly criticized China for not providing the WHO with enough data and information to really complete a thorough report. Somewhat cryptically, the White House this week said that it had access to information that bolstered one of the hypotheses around the origin of the pandemic, a hypothesis that was mostly dismissed by the WHO report. However, the White House did not actually specify what hypothesis that was, or really what the information it had was as well.
And is it another example, Elliot, of the World Health Organization's ties to China?
Well, in the US, as with Australia and really most other developed democracies, China bashing is very good politics. And it's one that has very much been a strong current in this country, going past back to the Trump administration as well. So if China is seen as obstructing research into the origins of the pandemic that has totally upended society here, you better believe that the White House isn't going to resist the opportunity to make light of it.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Elliot Nelson, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you.